to provide information in writing. Assemblymember Garratt, you're next on the questions.
Thank you. Afternoon. If I could ask you, Deputy Mayor, about during the ULEZ consultation, I understand you were having sort of regular briefings and updates throughout that. I think they were weekly. Is that right?
I honestly can't recall off the top of my head how frequently we had meetings on ULEZ, but regularly, clearly.
With the team running the consultation and what was, how things looked so far, that sort of
thing. So, yeah, I believe this might be relating to questions that you've asked me before about what was seen and when, and clearly I've answered those questions before, and you've chosen to interpret them in your own way, and that's fine, you have that right, but...
I think you might be confusing me with Assemblymember Fortune. Who I believe asked you those questions.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've answered those questions before this committee in the past.
On which date did you answer those questions before this committee?
The last time I appeared before the Transport Committee, I believe.
He's not on this committee.
Okay, Assemblymember Fortune doesn't sit on this committee. I don't know that he's been. I mean, I think you're possibly thinking of the plenary, perhaps. So, because my understanding is that you were having. And I say my understanding, what I mean is my knowledge based on freedom of information requests that we've seen, is that throughout the summer during the ULEZ consultation, you, Shirley Rodriguez, another deputy mayor, plus a whole lot of people from the mayor's team, including his chief of staff and various other senior people, plus senior people at TfL running the consultation, were having weekly updates. We've seen those updates. They had, the results so far, what the consultation responses have been on various questions. The consultation closed on the 29th of July, and then you had a final such briefing. I've seen all of those briefings, and they were quite similar, just updated each time with new numbers as the consultation went on. So it closed on the 29th of July, and then in early September you received a sort of final set of numbers. And then that was ahead of a meeting which I think was on the 28th of September, which also included the Commissioner and the Mayor and many other senior people. So at that meeting you were given what the results were so far on the ULEZ consultation, weren't you?
I honestly can't recall the number of meetings or the dates of the meetings that
were there
were had.
Any meetings in which you were given results so far? Or
so I've been asked in the past, was I briefed on the results of the consultation? And at the time that I gave the answer, I had not seen the results of the consultation. I was not asked, did we have regular meetings on how the consultation was going, which yes, we did. But I mean, you wouldn't have had a full range of responses at any of those updates. I'm aware, obviously, that there is a JR at the moment on the wider question, and so I can't give any further answer than the answer I've already given. But to be perfectly clear, everything that has been asked so far has already been answered by me in previous sessions.
Well, perhaps. So on the 17th of November, I have the transcript here because I know sometimes memories can fail. So obviously these meetings are recorded and transcribed. So Peter Fortune asked you the question: just going back to the consultation that we are talking about, have you been briefed on the contents or the results of that consultation? And then you replied to clarify: are you referring to the consultation on the ULEZ expansion? Assemblymember Fortune, yes. And then you replied, no, I have not been briefed on the contents of that. That was on the 17th of November. But by that point, you had had, by my count, close to 10 briefings on the consultation results as they were coming in.
Let me be very clear. I had not seen the results of the consultation at the point at which I was asked. So the answer I gave was correct.
I don't believe that's true, Deputy Mayor, because the briefing that you received in September,
believe it or not,
the briefing that you received in September contained the final public responses.
No, it didn't. I had not seen the final report that went to the Mayor, which was the basis on which he made the decision, and that is the question that I thought I was asked by Assemblymember Fortune, and it's the answer that I gave.
The question, no one mentioned, Assemblymember Fortune did not mention the report. You chose to interpret his question, which was, have you been briefed on the contents or the results of the consultation? You chose to interpret his question as being about a report, I believe, in order to conceal the fact that you had been briefed. So my question really is, why was it important for you in November to conceal the fact that you had lots of information about the results that had come in?
I didn't conceal anything. I would happily listed the number of meetings or whatever I'd had on ULEZ. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that results means the results of the consultation, which I had not seen at the time.
The results of the consultation are the responses that people sent. So I think that the concern it leaves me with is, can I really believe anything that you're really answering in response to our questions, or are you just choosing to respond to an entirely different question which suits your own purposes? does slightly undermine the purpose of the...
Again, results are results, and I had not seen the results. So you can believe what you want and say what you want about the answers I give. I can't help you in your interpretation of my responses.
Okay. So a document that has the word results on the front page and contains tables and bar charts and spreadsheets and so forth with the results of the answers to the questions that the Londoners have given in the consultation, your answer is that does not constitute results.
No, because the consultation was ongoing. So how could it possibly be the results if the consultation is ongoing?
No, it wasn't ongoing. It ended on the 29th of July, and that document was sent to you, I'm talking about now, in the first week of September, in relation to a meeting in the last week of September. So it wasn't ongoing, was it?
Well, I mean, in terms of the results as I interpret them are what are the end results and the report on the consultation. That's the only important thing to consider. That's the thing that the Mayor considered when he made his decision. And at the point that I was before the Assembly, I had not seen that.
So what further results came in after the 17th of November?
I'm sorry, I don't. There were no further results after the 17th of November, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, precisely. That's why there were no further. So your
again, I hadn't seen it. So
you'd seen it.
That was what I was asked.
On the 28th of September, you went to a meeting.
Assemblymember, can I just? I know. Sorry, I know this is how you like to work. You didn't ask for any time to be dedicated to these questions, and you didn't warn us they were coming. So can I ask you just now to give us an estimate of how much longer you would like in the time, so I can try and trim the rest of the agenda?
You have actually interrupted precisely at the point that I was finished.
Oh, it was really hard to tell. I was trying to sort of wait for a sign.
What I would point out is it's a 3-hour meeting.
It's fine. It's absolutely fine for you to have 5 minutes. You've had 5 minutes. I mean, that's fine.
After the 3-hour meeting, is that okay?
I just wondered if there was another 10 minutes coming.
So, moving on from, I think we've perhaps all reached our conclusion about the accuracy and veracity of the answers that were given in November. Moving on to, let's assume that ULEZ goes ahead in August. What level of public transport improvements are we going to see by then to help people to make the transition from car to public transport, which is supposedly the objective or one of the objectives of the policy, Deputy Mayor?
So just to point out, I did obviously also write to the Assembly following up my appearance, which you probably saw, I hope.
I read it. I found it disingenuous, if I may say. I wasn't going to go back to it, but it didn't.
That's your right. In terms of the additional services, we've got an announcement that's been made by the Mayor that there will be an additional 1 million bus kilometres which will be delivered throughout this year in advance of August. We've got buses planned to serve large developments once necessary infrastructure is in place in Barnet, Ealing, Harrow, Haringey. There will be extensions and reroutings to various bus routes in Southall and around Battersea, the Olympic Park, Wandsworth Riverside, and serving Springfield Hospital. There will be improvements in Havering, in Barnet, Southall, Harrow and Wealdstone, Haringey and Wanstead, and I believe the Commissioner will be updating the committee with further information on those routes in due course.
Okay. I didn't hear anything there for my residents in Croydon and Sutton. Did I miss that?
So we've already touched on some of the Sutton.
Well, those are replacing existing buses with electric buses, which is good for clean air. It's not improving people's transport options.
But I also said there would be detail in my response to the committee about the additional services.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that being comprehensive and impressive. The million bus kilometres that we hear a lot about, Deputy Mayor, is that a lot of buses? Does that sound like a lot, do you think?
Yeah, it's a lot. Clearly, delivery of any additional bus services at a time when financial restraints are what they are is difficult, but I'm pleased that we're able to do this, and I'm pleased that we're able to focus on outer London. Clearly, in many parts of central and inner London, bus patronage has declined, and it's declined largely because of the increase in other options and availability and frequency and reliability. Improvements to the tube service, improvements to London Overground services, for example, have provided direct alternatives for a lot of people in central and inner London. That is clearly not the case for many people in outer London, and that's why I think it's right that we concentrate the expansion of the bus network into outer London. And in addition to the additional 1 million kilometres announced ahead of August August, the Mayor has committed to fund an additional 1 million kilometres on top of that as well. So
Okay.
I think it's a good start to what should be the long-term objective of any Mayor and any Commissioner, which is to extend the density and frequency of services in Outer London.
Sure. So 1 million extra kilometres as a percentage increase in buses. Do you know what that is?
Not off the top of my head. Obviously, we have the largest bus network, I think, in the world, certainly in Europe. It doesn't compare to any service, if you think of any
Sorry,
big...
I'm conscious of time. I don't want the Chair to deem
Sure.
my questioning because you're talking
No,
about
I think it's
something
important to contextualise the increase. So we have an incredibly dense, big network already.
Yes.
And what we want to do, obviously, is increase the density and provision of options in Outer London, which is what the announcements on the additional bus routes are.
So if you round it to the nearest whole percent, it's a 0% increase.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to round down to 0%, by all means, but I think...
it's 0.21% is what I calculated out.
The figures speak for themselves. I think 2 million additional kilometres of bus coverage is a significant figure, whichever way you look at it.
I don't think
and it has to be contextualised in what is the largest bus network in the world.
Sure. I mean, I'm attempting to contextualise it. I think going back to my previous discussion about how I think about your answers, I think it's perhaps not a coincidence that you haven't calculated the percentage because it's so unimpressive. You talked about an additional million, which takes us to 2 million bus kilometres. That's still, by my reckoning, 0.41% increase, which again, to the nearest whole percent, is still 0%. No one's really going to notice that, are they? That's not a noticeable improvement in public transport. In order to entice people away from cars, which is your stated policy.
I think, if I may, Assembly Member Garratt, I think in the context of the total kilometrage we have, it isn't that big. But the bus network is heavily concentrated on inner London. In the context of the changes we're making to outer London, it's clearly a greater percentage. And this is work that we've put in place since the Mayor made the decision on ULEZ. So I think we have moved quickly to see what we can do in the relatively short time before ULEZ goes live. We're working on what we can do beyond the go-live date, and clearly we've got more in the pipeline, particularly as Silvertown comes into place, which will create further opportunity, and we will continue to have a focus on what we do in Outer London. So I think in the context of looking at it in terms of the Outer London kilometrage, it's clearly a greater percentage.
Okay. I mean, I guess you can add yourselves to the list of people caught on the hop by the Mayor's short notice announcement that it's expanding and not giving enough people time to prepare. In terms of improvements for my constituents, again, I'm not conscious that there's anything. Some of the transport upgrade projects in Croydon and Sutton that have been discussed for a long time, tram extension in Sutton, tram extension in Croydon, frankly, even just a tram capital maintenance upgrade for the existing trams in Croydon. Where are we with those?
So we have assessed the life of the existing tram fleet, the original tram fleet. You'll be aware there's a second, much smaller fleet which was purchased later. We believe that the existing tram fleet will become beyond its useful economic life towards the end of this decade. We believe there's a sound business case to replace the tram fleet. We don't have funding for that at the moment. We will include this as part of our long-term capital funding request of government going forward, but we have a strong desire and need to replace the tram fleet. In terms of further expansion of the tram network, that currently the business case I think that was looked at pre-pandemic has been put on hold. At the moment, there's we don't believe there's it's good use of funds at the minute to look at expanding that. Clearly, if the time is right, then we'll review that business case, but at the moment, there's no plans to extend the tram network.
And if the decision were made even today to expand it, I mean, it would be, 5 or 6 years before the first passenger were on those services, something like that?
I'm not close enough to it, but typically, if you look at most line extensions, it's between 4 to 6 years in other examples.
Okay, so we're probably going to have ULEZ and maybe even road user charging before we see any of those big upgrades in my constituency.
So tram fleet, ideally we would like to have the new tram fleet from 2028, if we can make that. The existing tram service, I think the teams do a very good job there, it delivers a good service, but at the moment there's no business case that justifies the expansion of the tram network at the moment compared to other cases.
Okay. Just quickly on the trams, what I would say is that I think we're already noticing gaps in service, which when I've inquired at TfL, it is because they're struggling to field a full fleet of trams on some days, which is creating gaps. So I think it's more urgent than your...
So that's been linked to supply chain issues, linked to the pandemic, and the current issues linked to supply of materials as a result of the economic situation, particularly around wheel sets. And we're working very closely with our supply chain partners on that. Tram availability has improved recently. We did have a period in the autumn where particularly some of the branch services didn't have as frequent a service. I met with the leader of Croydon just a couple of months ago, and we discussed this issue as well. And our team are very focused on making sure we improve the reliability and availability.
So you think you can tackle that problem without the big full capital refresh that we mentioned a moment ago? So you think that's solvable without that big capital spend?
Absolutely. This is an ongoing maintenance issue and supply chain issue that a number of sectors are seeing as a result of impact of Brexit, impact of Ukraine war, and availability of materials. So it's an unfortunate but ongoing maintenance issue that we don't need long-term capital funding for. We just need to work with the supply chain to get the availability of spares.
Okay, and finally, I asked the Mayor a couple of weeks ago at Mayor's Question Time about whether money from ULEZ, which of course is disproportionately raised in Outer London constituencies just such as my own, could be then disproportionately spent in those areas rather than just reallocated to existing spending, which is largely not in my constituency. He seemed to make an offer that he would go away and look at it. What's been looked at so far?
So from a TfL perspective, obviously we've got a priority of what we'd like to invest in for the future. I can't give you any specifics around what income from ULEZ would be spent on what, but any income from ULEZ will be invested back into the public transport network. If there are specific cases that clearly deliver value for money, then we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Sure. You appreciate what that sounds like for my residents, though, is that they're paying ULEZ and somebody else is getting some upgrades and improvements elsewhere.
Well, my responsibility is to hold the transport network, and I need to focus on where the priorities are. And if there's a specific case in Outer London, then clearly we'll look at that and prioritise accordingly.
Deputy Mayor, perhaps then it's a political question. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've given quite a lot of commitment on the need for increasing density of the network in Outer London. That is clearly an aim of this administration. I think it's a long-term aim of TfL as well. You know, we want to get to a situation, I think we all here want to get to a situation where the transport, public and active transport options in Outer London are as dense, are as available, are as varied, affordable, reliable, etc. and safe as they are in central and inner London. And that's the goal to which we strive. We're driven by the MTS. The MTS has the overall target of 80% of all journeys across London by active and public transport, and that includes, of course, Outer London. So anything and everything we can do to improve that within the realms of what is doable in terms of funding and everything else, then that will be our goal.
Okay, my observation would be you've more or less echoed the Mayor's answer to the same question I asked him last July. And from where I'm sitting, it does look a lot like talk and not action, but I look forward to written answers with big, long lists of action that my residents can look forward to.
Watch this space.